recording and our broadcast, and we should see our audience in a moment.
Yeah. Oh, there's Barb. Okay, good. Hello, Barb. I can read your lips.
How are you? Sorry, I was having trouble getting in.
All right, then. Is Dan here? No. Not yet, but I think we can start going here. Dan will show up at some point.
Okay, I'll defer to you.
Okay. Let me just that and do that and do that. Alrighty then. Let's bring this meeting to order. This is the June 17th, 2025 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place on the Zoom platform. This meeting is being recorded. First item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from June 3rd. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Hearing none. Do we
Motion
want?
to approve.
Second.
All right. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes.
I do have one comment on the agenda.
Okay.
It says June 17th, 3025. I don't know if that matters.
What's
or
your
not.
point?
It's only off by a century
Oops.
or two.
Okay. Oh, there's Dan. Good evening, Dan. We just approved the
Good
meeting
evening.
from June 3rd.
Okay.
Okay. Andy, do we have any Plum Island updates?
Not at the moment, other than to briefly say that there's a couple of different discussions going on with other communities. We need to have further follow-up with the Army Corps of Engineers about the gyre spot and the weir type discussion and all that. But several efforts to try to circle back on the analysis of sand movement, dredge, or more importantly, nourishment, situations. So just briefly on that.
Okay. Very good. Next one's a request for feedback on a geographic naming proposal for Artichoke Pond. I don't know who exactly is going to be doing that.
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me who might be presenting that or speaking to that.
Whoever wants to present that, if you're here, raise your electronic hand.
You may not have anybody in attendance to speak to that, I guess.
Does not look like it.
Postpone that to a later point in the meeting if you want.
Yeah, we could do that. All right, we'll table that for now. Next item is a Port Place willow tree. Someone going to? Oh, is that Tom? Are you discussing that, or Lisa?
No.
No. Okay. No. All right.
Well, I'll hold on to that one for as well.
Okay. So we'll move on to 570 Merrimack Street enforcement.
All right. Good evening. Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting here on behalf of Eric Primack. As you may recall, we brought to the Commission's attention that some tree work that was originally intended for the areas outside of jurisdiction up on the corners of Spofford and Merrimack that were within the area approved by the planning board and outside of conservation jurisdiction. That tree work kind of morphed into work that ended up within the jurisdictional area. We presented what had happened and talked about kind of conceptually where we were with a restoration plan with the commission, and the commission voted to authorize an enforcement order to address this issue. And so I'm happy to go into that a little further. I think everybody except Steve was present for that. So Steve, if you want, I can give you a quicker an overview of where
Yeah.
those tree cuts were.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you could.
So can you go to the graphic that I sent? I sent a graphic today with the updated with the trees that were cut and the numbers. Yes. Okay. So Andy, I don't know if you can zoom in on the sort of plan. So that is the area that's outside of jurisdiction. That was the basically Eric hired Tomahawk Tree. They're an arborist, well respected in town. They do good work, to come out and remove those. And while there, Eric took advantage of having him on site and had him start looking around at some of the other trees on site. And now if we can go down and a little bit over to the right now. So there are a couple things that are shown on this plan. One is if you see in the shrub area off on the left-hand side center of the screen, you see previously removed. We found that some of the trees that had been located before the sale of the property, this survey was based on an original survey done a couple of years before the sale, and then it was updated. We did miss a couple things where there were some stumps. There was a tree that had been removed prior to Eric acquiring the property. It's clearly they were older cuts. So we've updated, I think there are 3 locations where there were trees that just we had shown as existing and they don't exist. So we've corrected that. The area along the property line that you see there labeled pruned, those are all Norway maples. And we've now provided an arborist letter explaining why, but basically the arborist had recommended pruning them to lighten up the demand on the or sort of the weight of the canopy. His letter provides a little bit more on that, but basically they're not of great health, and he'd recommended that to increase their chances of sort of staying alive and staying up. They are.
Sorry, Tom.
Yep.
Sorry, it's Andy Port. Just to interject there, just for clarification, I think because some of these materials came in, the commission members may or may not have seen them, but the letter we have, we can certainly pull that up as well. The letter
Yeah.
from the property owner, as well as the to the extent that you're referring to something they may not have.
Right. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I just want to note that I'll give you a little more detail. I talked a little bit more in detail about it at the last meeting, but so that area of Norway's was pruned. They are the work that was done on those is very close to qualifying for the exemption of pruning of canopy within jurisdictional areas greater than 50 feet away. That exemption does require that you can't remove more than 10% of the canopy, and in some cases the pruning went a little bit beyond 10%, but it's pretty close. And since they were in Norway's, I talked to the commission about it. I didn't think it made sense given their location, the Norway's, and that the pruning was done for health, and it was something very close to exempt to offer mitigation or restoration for that sort of line of trees. But off to the right, you'll see tree number 10, which is between 25 and 50 feet from the wetland line and right near this little blob of a secondary coastal bank. That tree is a Norway maple. That, for health reasons, the arborist recommended removal. The trees 9, 8, and 7 were ash, green ash, and they did have the arborist found the ash borer, emerald ash borer on them, and they were also of ill health. Those were all removed. Those are all within the 25-foot to the wetland. The wetland kind of wraps around the edge of the boathouse in that area, and the one number 9 is also in that little blob of coastal bank. Um, I don't put a lot of stock in the impact within coastal bank. It is a resource area due to the way the coastal bank policy reads. But as we talked about in the hearing on this site much earlier in the hearing process, we're right on the edge of the coastal flood line change over to bordering change, and the actual function of a secondary bank in a location like this is pretty minimal. But regardless, trees 7, 8, and 9 are within the 25 no disturb, and 10 is within 25 feet of the coastal bank and also within the 50-foot. So I talked about offering 2 to 1, and the commission gave feedback. They also wanted to see an understory added with that. If we can go down, Andy, then a little bit. Okay, so there's a big oak that you may remember from the site visit that's out along the edge of the creek. It kind of stands up and over the edge of the field in a pretty dominant way. It while there's a couple other trees in the area, it really looks like a standalone tree when you're standing there. That was pruned. Again, the arborist letter will explain why, but that was pruned both to remove some dead branches, but also to relieve weight from the canopy. But that was heavily pruned. That also does not meet the exemption, so we offer mitigation for that. And after getting feedback from the commission, it's both some trees and some understory. If we can go over now, or actually you're kind of still in plan view. You look to the left of the creek. Tree 5 is a pine. It had signs of health. It was right near a shed that's going to be removed. Trees 3 and 4 were actually an elm and an ash intertwining, and they were kind of growing together. The ash, I believe, had some signs of illness, and the elm is susceptible to the Dutch elm disease, so we recommended removal of those. So they were removed. And then trees 1 and 2, we'll have to take another look at the letter on which species those were. I'm forgetting, but those were also removed at the advice of the arborist. And the 24-inch is a tree that had been previously cut and just was inadvertently shown on our site plan as existing. So we wanted to correct that as well. And what transpired, and I've got a letter from the owner that's been submitted as well, kind of explaining the situation. But I think the advice kind of morphed into Eric saying, okay, well, let's do this. And then the work was done. And so, this is the letter from Eric, and this was something Andy did ask us to provide at the last meeting. So Eric goes through and explains it, and then this is the letter from Tomahawk Tree. I apologize for the scan. It didn't really pick up his letterhead, which is a light color. But so basically it's got his arborist recommendations and then just screenshots of the plan that we just looked at in the area, so he could reference the numbers for which trees. So the ones that I was just trying to remember, I'm looking on that for which trees 1 and 2 were. I can go through the arborist letter in detail, or we can move on to the restoration plan if you want. But so Andy, if you can go to the arborist letter and let's just see
Yeah, okay.
trees 1 and 2 should be referenced there. 3, 4, 5. I apologize. So trees 1 and 2 are not referenced, but they they're on the very outer edge of jurisdiction. So if we go back and look at the plan, um, you can see they're kind of up the hill. They're right along the sort of corner of the property. And so they're outside the inner riparian. We did offer mitigation for those. So what we've done,
Tom,
and that,
I got one question.
yeah,
The American elm, has that already been removed?
yeah. So all of these were removed. I mean, basically what we did, we were in the middle of, we were expecting to come into that last meeting and, provide you materials and close out the hearing. And in doing the work, doing the field work, I went out and I saw stumps and I reached out to the owner, had discussion and realized that, they'd gone astray. And we reached out to the city on Monday. I found out sort of on Thursday going into Friday, and we rushed to put together a presentation and response and try to do the right thing and come in and deal with this through enforcement, um, and then try to incorporate any restoration into our landscape plan for the permitting set as well, so that everything is consistent. So, yeah, I mean, the tree removal was supposed to have been confined to the areas outside of jurisdiction. And, when people get on site with chainsaws and start moving around and talking and, then, you know, whatever brain freeze or whatever, they made bad decisions and did this. I'll note that the arborist is somebody who normally doesn't make this kind of mistake, and he did say in his letter that, in the future he's going to make sure to have a written approval before he's cutting anything near a wetland. I think he just thought that since the stuff up near Spofford was okay, that it was sort of all okay. Um, and it just wasn't it wasn't the right train of thought. So he's recognized that, and he does feel bad about what he's done.
I mean, too bad that American elm got cut, because if it's lasted this long, maybe it was worth saving, but
Well, they typically, I mean, my experience is they don't get much. There's a lot of elms out there that are 4 inches, and it was the 4 inch tree. It wasn't the big one.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Um, they don't get much bigger, and then they start getting the elm disease and die off. But they live long enough to propagate. So we've got all these saplings and smaller trees that are out in the woods, but they don't get much bigger than that. So what we did is, if we can go to the restoration plan. All right, well, so this is the landscape plan, right?
Sorry, I just flipped over to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So this is the tree restoration plan. What we've done is we faded the landscape plan so you could kind of see where everything is in relation to what we were planning on planting. And so you can see in this area, we're providing, since it's so close to the wetland, we're providing 2-to-1 trees. We have Nyssa sylvitica or black gum, and when I talked to the commission last, I was looking at red maple in the ones most sort of closest to the wet meadow. I've changed those over to red oak, and there's a red maple so the purple one is red maple. The 2 green ones, I believe, are and actually maybe you can zoom in a little bit more so I can see the letters, Andy. Yeah, so the AR is the red maple, the QA are the red oaks, the NS is the Nyssa sylvitica, and the PS would be a black cherry. So the black cherry, the Nyssa, and the red oak are really salt tolerant. There are some elements of brackish features within that wet meadow area. So we want to make sure that the trees can withstand salt. And the red maple is a little bit higher in elevation. It still can, in my experience, it tolerates salt well. There are a lot of people who don't think it does because of its exposure to salt as a street tree. But I honestly believe the reason it doesn't do well in those situations is because the root zone is so confined by being planted typically between a sidewalk and a street. But regardless, so we've come up with red oak, the Nissa, and the cherry. Those are going to do really well in restoring the sort of beneficial qualities of the ash, and the red maple is a much better choice than the Norway. And then underneath we've got both bayberry and clethra, or summer sweet, sweet pepper bush, however you want to refer to it, to provide an understory within that area. So that is what we're proposing to restore in that area where, and I think it's probably the most sensitive area where any tree removal was done. And we tried to take into account the feedback we got from the commission about adding in the understory. And the nice thing about the bayberry being almost an evergreen, it's not quite, will do a good job at trying to sort of shade out any invasives from coming in. And the clethra is a nice aggressive native plant, so it'll stand its own in sort of fighting back against any invading species that might be trying to come in there. So now if we can go down to over by the creek, let's start kind of in that area. All right, so for the pruning of that large tree, we're proposing to plant a red oak a little bit north of there. You can see the large green circle. There's winterberry and some other native shrubs going in. I think that I'd have to double check. I think that's more bayberry, but and then under the tree that was pruned, we're proposing to add some understory to kind of fill in any sort of lost lower canopy and provide understory under that. That is also the area you may recall during the hearing we talked about. I think that is the area where we had talked about preserving the sort of a little bit of the lawn going down as a path to get to the creek. We're just going to make sure we adjust our plantings to provide about a 4-foot wide path as you go through there to preserve that, because that is an area where historically the homeowners have gone down to the creek, and that will be part of that's part of the hearing process that we'll be talking about later. All right, so if we can now go a little bit plan left. So in the area where the pine and oak and all that were removed, we've got 2 red maples going in. We've added to the shrub plantings that were already proposed near there in the landscape plan. And then we've got more trees going up in the area near those 2 trees that were removed up by the property line, and then we also have some the shadblow. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a brain freeze. The amelanchier going in. Those are those sort of peach-colored smaller circles off on the left. So we're proposing to not just replace the tree material that was removed, I think in ratios that are consistent with what the commission has looked for in the past, but also expand the understory planting to undo, and replace the function that was lost from the removal of the trees.
What diameter are the trees that you're planting?
If we can go up to the planting table up top. So if you take a look in the mitigation planting column, if we can kind of scroll a little bit, yeah, if you can get so we can see that column on the last column on the right, that's the ones that we're proposing under this plan. The others are the parts that are on the landscape plan. So we're looking at, for example, the serviceberry are 4 to 5 foot tall plants. The serviceberry is Amelanchier or shadblow, goes by many names. For the red maple, we're talking 2 to 2.5 inch caliper. For the black cherry, a little bit smaller, 1.5 to 2 inch. They're tough to get much bigger than that. The and actually, I'm sorry. She called white oak instead of red oak. I was saying it was red oak. So the white oak, which is also salt tolerant, 2 to 2.5 inch calipers. So we're not looking at sort of New England wetland plant small little whips here. We're talking about trying to put some sizable plant material back in. And then there's a black oak going in. That's again 2 to 2.5 inch.
Okay.
And then and chokeberry, I think, are what's going in under the oak that was trimmed. So we have 11 of those, 26 of the clethra or summer sweet, 10 winterberry, 2 sweet spire, and 14 bayberry, 5 rose bay rhododendron. So, or rhododendron maxima. Those are all natives. They're all plants that'll do well in this environment. And we're planting in decent sizes to go back in.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and I guess I would say if the commission is amenable to this restoration plan, I do want to show you. Do you have the landscape plan up there too, Andy? Right? If we can
Yeah, 1 sec.
So what we did for the project, and what we'll be introducing this into the hearing documents, is we've just added this in so you can see them in the overall landscape plan. So when we go for a certificate of compliance, this is what to expect. However, the plantings would have to go in under the enforcement order regardless of whether the project even ever moved forward. So, but we just wanted the landscape plan to be consistent, and then you can kind of see how it all fits together nicely in terms of the flow of what we're adding in with what we were already proposing.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
just to help the commission, given the work involved here and the project timeline itself, this might be partly for the applicant, but in terms of the enforcement order, as distinguished from the project, what are you proposing for the time frame for doing the restoration work, such that on the enforcement order end, we could circle back and confirm if the commission's referencing this plan, when that would be completed by?
Yeah, so I would like to be able to do the planting in the fall. And given that we've had some fairly hot Septembers, I think I'd like to have October to do the work. So either the October 15th or the 31st, I think would be reasonable dates to get the enforcement planting in.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I'll do that to the commission, of course, but thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
And these will all have a 2-year growth,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think what we would do is provide you with a report, maybe planted by the end of October and a report by the end of November documenting it. And then we would then ask you to lift the enforcement order at a point when they've survived 2 years, or the other possibility would be that you put the survival of the plantings into the order of conditions, and we just make sure that they're planted to remove the enforcement order. And then we could just monitor them as part of monitoring everything. We'd be open to either approach.
Okay.
It seems cleaner to maybe do it that way so you don't have to track an enforcement order for 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
And I guess that's the beauty of having the landscape plan incorporate all that.
Okay. So are we all set with this presentation for now?
Yep.
Do we have any more questions? Anybody? No? Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess what I would ask is maybe the commission could vote to accept the restoration plan, and maybe Andy, you should switch tabs so they see which one they're voting on. And to update the enforcement order with a deadline for the plantings to go in and require 2 years of survival. And I think then what we'll do is we'll ask for a release of the enforcement order when the plants are in, and then ask you to consider the 2-year survival component to be locked into the order of conditions. And when you write the order of conditions, maybe we put a specific condition about survival of the plantings planted under the project as well as under the enforcement order.
Yeah, but my only issue right now is, none of us have had a chance to go over the letters from the owner or from the arborist. I don't know that I am totally ready right now to vote on on this whole plan, because we need to
Okay. Well, can I at least ask, is there any feedback from the commission? Do folks feel that this is responsive to our last discussions? And I mean, I just don't want to have to spend any more time on this if you guys are good with it. And then we could maybe have you make that vote at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And
I did review them, Joe, before you sent them right before the meeting. I did review them.
Yeah.
And I have no issues.
Okay. I don't know that we're gonna have a lot of issues, but the reality is we still gotta look at I haven't had any time to look at it, and I don't think Steve or maybe Janet either, or even Dan has had a chance to look at the stuff, so
right.
I'd rather take a look at it and then we'll get back to you or do something on the next meeting.
Okay.
Joe, I don't think you sent the letters. Are they on the website?
I thought I sent everything I got today.
Yeah, they came in today, so they're not posted. I don't think Tom, the restoration plan and so forth, obviously that's the enforcement order, so that's not going to be on the OpenGov record for the permit just yet. But I think as you mentioned, the other plan, the full landscape plan would be uploaded there, or should be.
Right. It's going to be part of it. We were just finalizing, and it's possibly in my email, but I didn't have it as of 5:30. We were scrambling to put together the relevant changes to the project documents that come from this. We've had to adjust our landscape management plan slash conservation deed restriction plan to incorporate things like the understory and the trees at the plan top where those trees were removed in the 25. We're now going to manage that the same way we are the wooded area along the creek. So we've had to adjust some of the lines on that work. So we've got and then we did adjust some stuff around the dock for the DMF stuff. So we're just trying to compile that into one final plan set to submit to you guys. And I was hoping to have that for you before tonight, but unfortunately we just ran out of time. So I think what we'll look to do is close this all out at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Steve, I don't know if you found those or not. I did send them. But if you didn't see them or didn't get them, just let me know and I'll resend them to you.
Oh, okay. I see them. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I don't have any major issues, but like Joe said, I haven't had time to actually look at any of this stuff. So
no, it's understandable. I mean, we do want to get moving forward. We are moving forward on the demo and everything on the areas that are outside conservation jurisdiction. But as I mentioned to the commission at the last meeting, as a result of this, we've talked to the whole project team and we've survey located the riverfront limit, the limit of jurisdiction on site. it's very clear nobody's going to go and do any work within the jurisdictional area until the conservation permit is issued and passed, past the appeal period.
Very good. All right, so why don't we move on for now? We'll be back at this soon enough.
Okay.
All right, so next item, certificates, compliance, etc. Dry Air Systems, Inc., 3 Stanley Tucker Drive, minor modification. Okay. Who's getting moved over?
I think we have Hayes Engineering.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, okay, there you go. Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. My name is Peter Rogan. I'm with Hayes Engineering and I represent Dry Air Systems.
Oh my God.
Dry Air Systems purchased the property at 3 Stanley Tucker Drive from Zampel Refractories,
No, I know.
subject to the order of condition,
Peter, he did work
and
for me.
proceeded to build the proposed building expansion, which is shown on this plan. Incorporated in this plan, which was the plan from the original NOI, was some rooftop storage. Jeff Burnell was unaware that the rooftop storage was required and built the building without it. And was kind of bad news from a flow mitigation standpoint. However, and Andy, can you put up the proposal? This is the proposed plan. So the reason we had rooftop storage in the original Zampel proposal was because he had to have a grade that allowed forklift trucks to go between the two buildings, the new addition and the existing building. And so he had a much lower floor grade. When Jeff built the building, he built it about 3 feet higher in floor grade than was originally planned. So that gave us the opportunity to provide mitigation underneath the parking lot. So what we're asking is the commission to approve a minor modification to allow for, instead of the rooftops, flow mitigation, to allow mitigation in the form of 2 rows of chambers buried underneath the back parking lot. I've been over this with Jeff and he's willing to go forward with the plan, and I submitted hydraulic calculations which support that this is similar to the rooftop mitigation originally proposed. Now, I would point out that we're not using these for infiltration at all, even though they're infiltration chambers, because of the nature of the soils in the park, but just simply like underground chambers to replicate the volume of storage that was represented by the rooftop. If the commission just votes this, we'll just pick up the change in the as-built when we apply for a certificate of compliance. That can just my presentation, unless Andy, if you want to put up the comparative chart, if you have it there, of flow mitigation.
I'll defer to the commission. I don't know if that's more detail than they want, but I'll defer to the commission.
Okay,
Well-
so this is just to slow down the flow? What?
That's correct. It's just runoff mitigation.
So the original roof area was not calculated or taken into account, and this now does that, right?
That's correct. I mean, we didn't have any infiltration because the soils in the park, I think you all know, are very, very clayey soils. There's virtually no infiltration.
Right, yeah, that's what I needed a little clarification on. So is it how is the water coming out if these are buried under the parking lot? Are there underground
Yeah,
pipes?
the underground chambers, there are 4 scuppers we show coming off the roof, or actually 5, I'm sorry, there's a 5th one in the northerly corner there. Those scuppers will go directly into the chambers. And then at the very south end of it, there's a roof drain that goes back to discharge where the rooftop storage would have discharged initially out. Andy's showing that very well right there.
Okay.
So it performs the same function as the rooftop storage. The only reason we didn't do that in Zampel's plan was because they would have been so low, but he built the building about 3 feet higher in solo floor, which didn't make any difference from an environmental standpoint. But Zampel had wanted to be able to run a forklift back and forth. Jeff didn't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of fortunate when he came to see me, and I'm sure that it was done, that he just didn't understand. You know, that's the problem when somebody buys a property and they don't. I mean, he was aware of the order. In fact, he made sure to check that the order was extended before he started construction. But the building plan was not included, apparently. I don't know, is Jeff on? Hello?
Jeff Zampel?
No,
Who?
Jeff Purnell.
Oh, Jeff Purnell.
Yeah, I
there.
just attempted to, Jeff, do you
Yeah.
want to address the commission?
Yes, hi, Jeff Brunel from Dry Air Systems. So we purchased the building from Zampel, but they never had a complete building drawing. They just had like almost like a cartoon rendering of elevations. So we weren't privileged to see the details of what they were going to build for a building. We only had the footprint of the 112 by 86. So when we went to design the building we wanted to do, we didn't know we had any restraints on that. So we went with the building we did that had the one pitch to the back instead of having the rooftop retention, which we didn't even realize until I had met with Peter somewhere along the line. And they said, what about this? And then we realized we had a problem. And then we notified the town about it and went through this process to get it rectified.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is Andy, just for clarity, you know, comparison to the original plan, this is where the water was coming out originally. It's just that, you know, as Peter mentioned, it goes into the chambers from the roof here. Wasn't taken into account previously, but then discharges to the same location through the roof drain piping.
That's correct.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little confused. You got something that's buried underground, but it's using the rooftop piping to discharge? How does that work?
Well, the water comes off the roof in the 5 locations that
Yeah.
we indicated there. They're scuppers. The roof that was actually built slopes from what is basically, I guess, the west to the east. And so he can collect all the water along that easterly edge. That goes into the underground chambers and discharges where the roof would have discharged originally. The reason we can do it is we have enough hydraulic head to do it because the building is higher. The bottom floor is higher than it was. So we got 3 feet to play with there that we didn't have before.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand how the 3 feet you've got to play with has got to do with something that's underground.
Well, it allowed us to bury the chambers underground where we wouldn't have had the height to do that before because the building would have been lower.
They got to do the slopes for the piping back to drainage, you know, the other drainage lines. So that's part of the slope.
Oh, so what you're saying is the building itself is up higher, the whole thing's up higher
The floor of the building is higher, that's correct.
than it would normally be.
Correct.
Than it was originally designed. It doesn't make any difference from an environmental standpoint. And the reason it was designed that way was because of Zampel's requirement to run the forklift back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Jeff apparently didn't have that requirement, so the floor of this is actually, I think it's 2.7, almost 3 feet higher than the warehouse in the front, correct, Jeff?
Yes. And just to clarify, the reason Zampel was, they own the building next door. They wanted to be able to drive from this building to the other building. We don't own that building, so we're not leaving our property. That was, if you're confused about the fork truck going back and forth, they own the property to the left of this building as well. So they wanted to be able to connect back and forth, which we don't have any need to do anymore.
Okay.
So when the chambers were installed, did you do any kind of erosion control or, protection?
They are
of
not
the-
installed currently. This is
They're not
Perspective.
installed, but the erosion
Oh, okay, okay. All right.
remains the same. There's a 8-inch wood chip silt sock. The limit of work doesn't change at all. The limit of paving doesn't change.
Okay.
Simply buries these chambers below the parking lot and discharges in the same place.
Got it.
All right.
Anybody else? Okay. What do we want to do?
Make a motion to approve the minor modification.
Second.
All right. Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, could you just
Thank you.
clarify who made the second, that motion?
Uh,
Was there a second?
Dan did.
Dan.
Standard,
thank
yeah.
you.
all right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion to open the public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All opposed? Okay. First item is Judith Welch, 101 Curzon Mill Road, notice of intent.
All right, good evening. Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. And Lisa Mead's also here for this one. And we just want to reopen. This is a renewed hearing. You may recall we did continue this prior to opening the hearing from the last meeting, and it was reposted so that the new members or a new member can be active on it. Andy, if you can go, there was a presentation one I sent as well. If you don't have it, I can probably just work off this. No, it's a different project. That's okay. We can just work off this. So at the end of Curzon Mill Road, we had proposed a no, let's stick with that one you had. Oh, actually, all the way
There.
All the way to the right.
Keep going to Basin Street.
all the way to the left or all the way to the right? It's
There you
one-
go. That's it, Andy.
Yeah.
Nope, next one over.
Next one over to the right. Nope,
Other way.
other way.
You're on the right.
Now you've gone too far.
Yeah, the last that tab 2 over from where you are to the right or to the left, whichever way you're standing in relation to your computer.
Sorry, you're seeing something unfortunately a little bit differently than I am, the way it's displaying because of Adobe or something. So
Oh, okay.
could you
Yeah, so
clarify which tab you're referring
it
to?
says 101 Curzon MI.
Right there. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one I had
Okay.
a moment ago.
All right, then if you go all the way to the left of your tabs, if you can use that left arrow, it's off site now, right? Keep going. Okay, right there. Try that.
That's it.
Yeah, try that one. Is that the same?
This
thing?
is that sheet that we have displayed right now. You should be seeing.
Yeah, so this is the original permit file. I thought I'd sent you a
The only other one that I have is the one that we just showed a moment ago, which is this one.
right. Okay, so let's just stick with this. So we proposed in the riverfront on a piece of land a new garage on behalf of the Welches. This is a pile supported garage just inside the property line. We kind of span across to reach the garage from a little bit of upland to minimize floodplain impacts. The original proposal was really mainly about the flood storage and the proximity, you know, having it as far away from the resource area, which we did. And then we had some questions at the hearing about how are we connecting into utilities, because Curzon Mill, it turns out, does not have sewer. So that was really a great question to ask. And the architect, when they did the design, never verified sewer was available. But on the second floor of the garage was an office space with a bathroom. So we had that issue, and we also have we found there was a propane tank and a generator that had been put in place in an emergency that occurred after our original survey had been done. So we still are we have to get this on the plan, but we have the generator and the propane tank are being located to demonstrate they're not in, or they were located to demonstrate they're not in the floodplain. That issue was fairly easy, but the issue of tying into septic, when the engineer went out to take a look at the system is over by the old mill building, which is right up next to the river. So for you guys, if you've been down, so you can actually see the it says right there, trustees on the edge of a building. That is right at the dam. So the dam that runs at the end of Curzon Mill runs right next to their property. So if you've ever walked down there, you've seen that. There's this tiny little yard, and the existing system is not too far from the river. And it's not quite as old as the mill building, but it's certainly not new. And so the recommendation was actually to build a modern system over on this property next to the garage and discontinue use of the mill system and connect the mill into this. So we're in the process of scheduling test pits, and then the health director situation arose, and my understanding is at the same time the health department was engaged in changing contractors for the person who oversees the test pits. So we're kind of waiting till we can do the test pits to confirm that we can do this. But Steve did this as a kind of conceptual place we can fit in a septic system, meet the 50-foot wetland setback, and get something that will function to serve the mill building in a much better way, provide a huge environmental benefit. And then the clouded area is just for the surveyor to pick up additional detail in that area so he can do the pipes correctly. So right now where we're at is we're really just waiting on that and getting the additional detail on the generator and the propane tank on the plan. Once all that is done, then we're going to look to come in and close this out. One thing I did want to run by the commission is we're going to have to discontinue the use of the system that's over on the mill property. And I believe that's an old cesspool style pit. So what we would be doing is I think we would want to just file an RDA to give us the ability to crush and backfill that, and then to just do the plumbing to connect over, seeing as that's a relatively simple bit of project on the other side, and it's almost self-mitigating, provided we have erosion control in place. And the project overall ends up really improving the water quality in that area by putting a modern Title V system in for this structure.
But Tom, the proposed place for the septic system is that striped area to the left?
Yeah, it's like the only place we could put it. If you take a look at the geometry of that lot, right, we need the 50-foot.
It drops down a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got both floodplain and that, and Steve thinks Steve Sawyer thinks he can actually get this designed in a way that will allow us to meet the floodplain standards as well as, get all the separation to groundwater. Because of the way it drops off, it seems like a good spot for it.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to review that.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, that's Steve, it was your question, and it was a great question, because had we had you approve this thing without that, we would have been reeling when we realized we had no place to tie into. So,
And you need to believe me when I tell you there's no sewer down there.
yeah, no, I mean, I was just, so I've seen systems that are cross country, and it just was surprising to me that there would be a section to report without it. But I guess it shouldn't surprise me so much because this area is relatively remote.
Right. Well, even, park headquarters way up the street, they don't have sewer there either.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and this is, this is an area where you've got the artichoke coming into the Merrimack. It's just, it's a good place to have fully functioning and modern systems handling the sewage.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think this is it's not that the other system is currently functional. It's currently, a legal system. It's not, it's just Steve Sawyer was looking and saying, we really ought to do the right thing and build a modern septic for this. And the best place to do it is further away from the resource. So,
Sounds good.
And I think the whole team agreed. Lisa, am I missing anything?
No.
I mean, this has been approved by zoning, right?
Right. We had to get variances in order to do this and keep it out of the resource area and above the floodplain. So it's all been approved by the zoning board. We're just waiting to finish up this part of it. And the applicants are very happy to be able to modernize this Title V system.
Okay.
All right.
So you're looking for a continuance to what, next meeting?
I think at this point, even if we got the test bits in, then Steve's got to do the final design and we've got to, do some process. I'd say, why don't we continue it out a month?
A month. Okay.
So the second meeting in July?
Which,
It's the 15th.
the 15th?
You want to go with that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So you got a motion?
Motion to continue to July 15th.
Do I hear a
Second.
second?
Yep,
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Roll call: Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Bob Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Thank you. All right. Now to Five Basin. Cindy Singer, Cindy L. Singer Revocable Trust. Five Basin notice of intent.
Yeah, yes. I'm Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. Lisa Mead's also here with me tonight for this one as well. So you're actually looking at 5 Basin Street right there. And basically this project includes 2 elements. One is there is a a Chapter 91 license for the revetment and bulkhead arrangement that runs along the basin, and that revetment has slumped, and essentially as it flattens, it directs more energy not just at the shoreline but also at the structure that is sitting on top of it. So we need to do some work, and Lisa O'Donnell has looked at it. She's written a letter which is in the record. She is finishing up the actual structural plans for that she has told me. I talked to her today. She expects to have them to me before your next meeting. But basically it involves essentially reconstructing that revetment back to what the Chapter 91 license actually shows. And under Chapter 91, we're required to maintain that. As part of that, and I think, Andy, if you can go down to the next page. So you see the structure on the right, and then You've got kind of a bulkhead on the left. There's a bulkhead back under that structure. There's what appears to be almost like skirting along the seaward side of that, which is really to dissipate energy that would go under there, as well as to prevent ice from getting in there. If we can go to the next, go past the chapter 91, keep going. All right, so we have some images. These are architectural images. There's a photograph of the existing house. If we can keep going. All right, so what is proposed, actually, if you can stick with this, on the house itself, it is a deck that would be extending off of the second floor. The view on the left is from the basin. The view on the right is from, I guess it would be the south side of the house. So there'd be a deck, a spiral stair going up. The deck would run along the side of the house and then extend out from that back corner of the house out over existing landscape area, pile supported, elevated significantly above the flood. That's a relatively straightforward project. You see on the bottom, there's an existing garage. The idea is all interior to the garage. Basically, there would be an outdoor kitchen that would be recessed into the garage and a bathroom added with an exterior door to enter the bathroom. And that all that work is interior, and that means that basically the applicant would be able to essentially open up some doors and have an outdoor kitchen and then close it up, and it still maintains usable space within the garage. So it's not a very deep installation, but it's something that gives her the outdoor kitchen that she was looking to get without having to put it out somewhere outdoors, so to speak. Okay, if we can go to the next page. All right, so the proposal is that we would remove that deck structure down by the water that the applicant actually calls her dock. It is something that she's able to put kayaks in and out of the water when it's up really high, or she carries them down the stairway. The stairway is a necessary element of the Chapter 91 license that provides a means of getting to and from the intertidal zone. And then we would reconstruct the revetment and the licensed Chapter 91 stuff back to the Chapter 91 plan with the recommendations from Lisa O'Donnell. And then we would reconstruct the deck, lifting it up a foot. We shorten it a little bit on the north to south, pulling it away from the property line to the south, and extend it a little bit landward, still over the rock area, but we lift it up a foot and use through flow decking. The idea there is to limit any damage to that structure and also make it more resilient from water reflecting off of the revetment, and to increase the resiliency while not changing its utility and its ability to be used. Then we would attach a seasonal ramp and float system that would provide boating access directly off of that. And also we would reconstruct the stairway down and the platform. So we did a site visit, and I think if we can go to the next set of pictures, which are after this. So I think the commission may remember, you saw that the existing stairs are actually in really rough shape. And this is one element of the amount of time it's taking us to actually get the structural plans, as you guys, I think, are aware. Lisa O'Donnell's in a lot of demand, and she's quite busy, and she's just taking longer than we would have hoped to get this done, but we should have that soon. Those stairs are not all that safe. So I had mentioned this to Andy, and I think if we can get somebody arranged to actually go in and repair the stair portion of this, at least on an interim basis until we can get this work permitted. We're likely to look to file an emergency cert request to be able to do that, to maintain those stairs in safe condition, because she's obligated under the Chapter 91 license to have those things passable.
Defer
So,
to the commission, but obviously I have no objection to that, just to be clear.
right. So I just want to give you guys a heads up on that. But you can see how the structure comes back and meets the grade. Unfortunately, we've got some covered furniture there that's in the way, but it comes back and meets the grade. And so the way this is used is you walk right off the lawn onto it over about a foot and a half wide strip of rock that's at the top of the revetment. If we can go to the next picture. Here's a picture from the north end looking to the south along it. You can see how the bulkhead section there is in rough shape, and the revetment is flatter than shows in the profiles. And then if we can go to the next thing. So here you can't really see it too well with the photos, but the stone underneath there has flattened out. And that's caused water that does get in there to reflect up and damage the structure, as well as it's compromised the function of the revetment itself. And again, from this view, you can see the stairs are in pretty rough shape.
Tom,
Yep.
so those boards that are underneath, hanging down from the deck,
Yep.
is that part of the Chapter 91 that they have to
I
be
be-
there?
They've
Or-
been there in every picture I've seen of the structure, and my understanding, talking to Lisa O'Donnell, they serve an energy dissipation function, as well as preventing large chunks of ice from getting in. She had some ideas how she could possibly create some openings in there and still have it maintain that function. So I'm kind of waiting for that next plan so I can take a look at that and review with the client. But I think we're during the site visit, I know you mentioned that, and we're trying to see if there's something we can do that would not compromise the function that they have been serving, but maybe make something that's a little bit more environmentally friendly. I will note that while this is on dune, this revetment does curtail most of the function and the interchange of sand that a dune without a revetment would have. So those are not currently inhibiting the movement of sand.
It just seems like when waves hitting that, flat surface would cause a lot of erosion.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that, but the sand seems to build up along there.
Yeah.
You're not really seeing it, but that's perhaps because they don't extend all the way down to the rock.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think we'll come in with something that's at least going to be better than what you're seeing here in terms of what you guys typically look to see. But again, keep in mind this is an armored portion of dune, so that does have to be kind of considered in how we look
Yeah.
at this.
Okay.
Okay, if we can go to the next picture.
But, just,
Oh.
you had asked whether or not it was part of the Chapter 91, right, Steve? And
Yeah.
you didn't really answer. I thought that deck was not.
Oh, sorry. The deck is, you're right. The deck is not, but there's a bulkhead shown in there somewhere, which I think is actually behind the stone in the back. So no, I'm glad you corrected me there. That's right. But I've seen pictures of this. This structure was licensed or permitted by the commission at the same time the license was issued. So you can see there's a retaining wall towards the back in that. So the revetment goes back to a retaining wall. The retaining wall, I think, is all under stone. And then you can see there also was there's a line kind of mid riprap that represents what we believe is the other sort of bulkhead that you see. But you're right, that structure does not have a Chapter 91 license. It was constructed just behind the mean high water line with an order of conditions. So here you can kind of see the slope of the revetment in the back and how it kind of flattens out in the foreground. That's about the best way I can show you how it's slumped. You can also see some of the materials in there. You can see a couple chunks of pavement. There are some like little pillows, which are not visible in this picture, but I've seen out there that are somebody, when they were building this, put bags of concrete and just let the ocean set them, and then the cardboard rip off and form these sort of pillow-shaped stone-like things. One of Lisa O'Donnell's comments is you need to have a far more consistent stone that's properly dense and sized to provide proper protection. So that's one of the things her plans will incorporate. And there's just another picture along the backside. So in the drawing, Chapter 91 drawing, you see a line where that wall is, and then you see another line for another wall that is actually back where the revetment is meeting the lawn area. So, I think we had a good site visit. I think you guys were able to see the conditions out there, see a little bit of the need for this, and see how the situation is relatively unique in terms of Plum Island with a Chapter 91 license on a revetment. It's not the only one out there with a license, but it is, among the very few. So in total, we made sure that the total of the proposed deck and the proposed reconstructed deck don't exceed the 20% limit that would cause this to become a redevelopment project under the regs. So they are allowable within the regulations. And during the first hearings that we had, we were asked to provide a more in-depth regulatory analysis under the ordinance, and Lisa Hamid and I are working on that. So we'll be providing that once we get that final plan from Lisa O'Donnell. The next step is I have to reach out to the Chapter 91 program to respond to a DEP comment to make sure that they agree that the scope of the work fits within repair, or to pursue whatever license we need to pursue in order to actually properly do this work. And then we'll provide you with the result of that, along with the regulatory analysis and any plan updates that ensue from all of those discussions.
I would just add, Tom, also that as to the second floor deck on the house, that because of the height, it had to be approved by the zoning board as a special permit for nonconformities, and that was done a couple of months ago.
And the other thing that I'll mention is and I think during the site visit you guys saw, this site is really constrained in terms of getting equipment to the back. We note that the actual access method is going to be determined by the contractor that gets chosen. The piles are expected to all be helical, and we expect that a viable way of getting in there is at the end of the street, at the end of Basin Street there's a way to get out onto the beach when it's low tide. And a viable way would be to put in some type of matting and drive the equipment along the beach to then get up on the property and install that, and also do the work on the revetment. Barge is another viable way, or providing some way of protecting the landscape and getting the equipment somehow from Basin Street forward. So we would anticipate, as a condition, we would submit to you a site access plan that would take into consideration, depending on the way we're getting in, whether it's working around the tides or whether it's protecting things so that we don't damage anything as we do the work.
Okay. Julie, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Joe. And I'm just asking a question that I believe I asked at a previous hearing on this project, which is, Tom, if you could explain how you determined that the proposed reconstructed deck above the revetment is permittable under our regulations.
Yeah, as I said then, while I do have some discussion about that in the NOI, we are going to provide that more up-to-date and detailed regulatory analysis in the with the future documents that we provide. So we'll go through that. That point was noted, and we will provide that. As we mentioned at the time that we went to a change, we had a slightly different configuration, and Ryan from Lisa's office and I went and we did have a discussion with you, and we talked about doing this in a way that kept the support locations in the same place, and talked about a viable way where it fit within the regulations. But we do need to spell that out in a little bit more detail.
Could I just recommend that you don't utilize the conversation that you believe we had, maybe it was last summer in the office, which was probably a casual conversation before this notice of intent was ever submitted, about what I may or may not have said about this deck, because I hadn't seen a plan at that time. And I'm just wanting to emphasize that we would not be able to permit, or the commission would not typically be able to permit, a newly constructed structure of any sort, even including a deck, that didn't meet the flood zone regulations on Plum Island.
Right. Well, we believe this can be permitted, and we'll, as I said, we will provide you with that regulatory analysis.
Okay, thank you. We got anything else on this?
Yeah,
Oh.
Go ahead.
I just have a small question. Had you mentioned, Tom, a seasonal dock too?
Yes, so the ramp that you see, the proposed gangway and the floats, those are seasonal. In other words, you see them all over the place. An aluminum gangway, it gets connected to the mainland structure, and then the float, and it gets put in the spring and taken out in the fall. Typically, the ramp is kind of slid on top of the float, and then one of the marinas hauls it off and stores it for the winter, and then they bring it back and install it. We have an updated anchoring plan that I don't think is in the materials I sent Andy for tonight, but it uses helical anchors, elastic rods, and it has feet on it to keep it up above the substrate. It meets the sort of standard marine fisheries requirements for these, and it's licensed. Either we're going to explore whether we add it to the Chapter 91 license, or whether we just do it through what's called a 10A, which is a seasonal dock license through the harbor master, which is authorization under the Chapter 91 statute for a seasonal dock, as long as it's a bottom anchored structure.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering about that.
Steve, you have something?
Well, I was going to ask where the storage was going to be for those seasonal floats, but you just answered it.
Yeah, there's no place on site.
Yeah.
For that. You know, if we figure something out, I'll let you know. But I mean, basically, I think it just gets taken off and stored by one of the marinas. It's oftentimes the marina that constructs the float and orders a gangway that takes care of it.
Okay. We got anything else for now? No. Anybody from the public want to talk about this? Raise your digital hand if so. Okay. Seeing nobody. Do you want to go to the next meeting?
I'd like to be optimistic. I mean, if I get the plans from Lisa O'Donnell, and if I can get a meeting with Chapter 91, really, really fast, I might be able to get this in a fashion that you guys could work with at the next hearing. So I'd like to try to be optimistic and extend it and put this to July 1st. there's a chance that around, the fourth holiday, I'm unable to get that meeting with Chapter 91, et cetera. So I may then request a continuance to the 15th, but I really do want to try to get this done. So let's stick with the first.
Okay. Got a motion to continue this to July 1st.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Back to 570 Merrimack Street. Eric Premack, notice of intent.
Okay, again, Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. We have some things to get into you. I want to just go over that list of what we are planning on getting into you, just to make sure that that is your expectation. I'll formally submit the landscape plan into the record, but since we don't have any other real graphics to put up, we'll put that up because that's still helpful for one element. Andy, if you can zoom down by the dock, kind of in that area. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we did get our marine fisheries letter, and they mentioned that it was salt marsh in that area. And I think you may recall Mark West had done the original flagging. I did go out and look at it. I agreed with it. So I went down, and that's actually, I was doing the field work for this when I noticed the other matter. And so one of the things that they mentioned is that, and then they mentioned that, that they prefer to have these walkways and everything up at a 2-to-1 ratio. In this case, we have an existing building there. One of the things that we've updated on the plan is the original survey neglected to pick up there is a deck on the landward side of that building, an existing condition. That's actually how you get into it, is you step up on a landing deck. And we're tying into that. We were originally tying into that landing deck, which only gave us a few feet of clearance around where the building is. We ramped up to it. And then as you got out towards the water, we got a few more feet of clearance, and then the ramp came down. Our approach on that is one, we are using through flow decking. We've narrowed up the walkway a little bit. You see where it flares out on the water side of the building there. We're going to be narrowing that up. And what we're doing is, as we reach the existing deck, we're going to actually step up. So you'll actually step down onto the entry deck, and then we're going to step up one more time. So we are going to try to get some more elevation. There's no way with the existing building elevation that we can actually get the full 2-to-1, but combined with the through flow decking, I'm confident that we're not going to have any effect there. I did look at the species, and there are some salt marsh species in there. It is a brackish environment. There is some cordgrass, so I'm confident that area is going to be able to survive fine under there. And I will submit for the record pictures of a through flow deck walkway that I permitted in Gloucester that is 1.5 feet off the salt marsh with perfectly healthy salt marsh underneath. So we are doing our best to get as much elevation above the resource as we can. We're unable to get the full 2-to-1. So I just wanted to update you on the approach that we're taking to respond to the marine fisheries. I'll note that the marine fisheries comments are comments as opposed to the natural heritage comments that are requirements. So we're doing our best to meet the spirit of them. And as the letter does note, and this plan doesn't show it, but our anchoring system does call for helical, but we show habitat blocks because if we can't use helical, we wanted to show what would have the most impact, which is the habitat blocks. So overall, they like the dock design. they commented on that, and we're looking to accommodate that. And I've also updated my description of that overall wetland area to be one of both some freshwater area as well as some brackish marsh. It's all sort of located within there. It doesn't get inundated a lot, but I guess during, a storm on a king tide event or a nor'easter, then the water does get up into that field a bit. So that's about all I have for you tonight, but I want to get, if there's any feedback on our approach to addressing the marine fisheries, I wanted to at least have a discussion about our approach on that and make sure that seemed to make sense to you guys. And then we would look to continue this, and then and the other materials I'll be getting in. So the landscape plan, then we have a plan that is our conservation deed restriction plan that has also our kind of how our landscape, the allowable landscape management things. It incorporates what I've already talked to you guys about at the prior hearings, about things like the two buildings could be expanded by no more than 20%, but only with, proper permits. The ability to maintain that path down to the creek. But it would be that grass surface unless they received approval from the commission to change the surface. But, invasive control throughout, and then managing the wildflower meadow one way, the wet field or wet meadow salt marsh area another way. We get rid of the current regular mowing that occurs throughout, and we turn it into either annual or biannual mowing, depending on where. And then all of the wooded areas are maintained with pruning for health, removal of hazards only, and invasive treatment throughout. So I think those are the things, along with an full updated plan set that has that tree removal plan or the updated tree plan replaces our existing condition plan, because that is now the existing condition, and the slight tweaks that we've made to the civil plan set to adjust to what's happened out here, as well as to the dock stuff. So with that, entertain any discussion around that, and then we would look to continue this to the meeting on the 1st.
This is Andy. If I could just chime in, just in terms of timing, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of giving the timing to the next meeting, if that's the case. Uploading the revised materials or new materials such that the commission members can make sure they've reviewed it before the next meeting.
Yep.
Otherwise, it'd be harder for the commission members to be in a position to close out or address, the tail end of either enforcement or the plan approval that your client's looking for. So hopefully, with all those materials uploaded enough time, the commission members will be able to see that in the open gov record, and then come to the meeting with hopefully everybody, up to speed at that point.
Yeah. I think I was about 2 hours away from being able to get you a complete package, and maybe another hour for a cover letter. So I think we'll have everything into you, certainly by the end of the week.
Okay, good.
Tom, I just had a question about, like, you're going to be cutting back on the mowing
Right.
What about the Phragmites that seem to be really prevalent on both sides of the property? I mean, I guess
Right.
the mowing helps keep that down, but now if you do less frequent mowing, it helps the other plantings, native species, I guess, grow. But I guess what would be the plan for?
So on the, and this I may not get to you tomorrow, but I'll include something on that in a little more detail. But Phragmites can be controlled a couple different ways. We are committed to doing invasive control here, and that does include the use of things like either something like rodeo, which is a glyphosate based, or habitat, which is ismapir. The woody stuff, we would be using a triclopyr based aquatic safe. And those are all aquatic safe formulations. But the other thing that Phragmites does respond to well is cutting at the right time of year. So what we would envision, and I call for that sort of the wet area to be mowed late summer, early fall, and ideally it would be late summer where the Phragmites is tasseled out and before it really begins sending energy back down into the roots. So you typically, the trigger is when it has just begun to tassel out, you cut it. If we get areas that are denser than others, then we may want to go in and selectively trim those. If it's a monoculture, I guess you could go in and actually cut it, but you would go in with a string trimmer or something and just continually cut it as it regrows until the end of the season. And it does take several years that way, but you can deplete the energy from the rootstock. It never 100% goes away. With the herbicide, because the roots are so interconnected, if you give enough of the plants a good dose, they can actually kill plants, even the ones that you don't get contact with. So typically I'd like to make sure we've treated at least 25% of the stems in a stand. I've even done areas of, about a half an acre with stem inject, which is painful. We wouldn't necessarily be looking to do that, but we'd be looking to do something that does not have any sort of non-intended targets with the application of any herbicide. But it will be a battle to keep it out of there, but both from an environmental point of view, it's the right thing to do. But also if you're, one of these homeowners and you want to look out over a pretty view at your your river frontage, I think the Phragmites is not going to be all that sightly. So I think there'll be an incentive for them to stay on top of that.
So, Tom, the meadow is owned by one of the owners.
Right.
Right. But the other homeowners would need to be involved in the expense of this. And there isn't a homeowners association, or maybe there is.
Well, yeah, so there is some type of entity, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the other thing we do need to get to you is we had agreed that we would have an entity. We've been exploring because of this unique situation where it's not, these are all individual single-family home lots. So a homeowners association is one way of doing it, but there were some other entities that Jeff Roloffs was looking into about how we would actually fashion that and how the funding comes from it. But ultimately, the order of conditions will be filed at the registry on the lots that that exist there, but then ultimately it will be the lot that owns the area that needs to be managed that is sort of legally responsible, but the HOA will also, or if assuming it's an HOA, will be in there. And Jeff is on the line, I think, here, so maybe Jeff can chime in on what the organizational structure of that will be. Is Jeff out there? Do you see him?
I'm not seeing him.
Okay, well, we will provide a write-up of kind of how that will be, enough that we can have you, and we may even suggest a conditionable language that you could put in there that, so if we haven't determined the legal structure, that we would provide the legal structure and provide a copy of, the HOA agreement or whatever the path is for that. But the idea is the areas that'll be subject to the conservation deed restriction will be sort of the management will be shared. That building that is in the field, that is one that is expected to kind of be a common like clubhouse area for the 5 property owners. The existing boat building down by the water, the access to the docks, all of that's for all 5 lots. And we envision that building down by the water being used to store boating stuff, and it's going to have it already. There is electricity and water going down there. We may have to replace those lines, but the, it may even have a fridge or something like that in there for everybody to share. But all of that will be borne out by all the homeowners.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have anything else at this point?
No.
Okay. Anybody from the public want to speak on this? Raise your digital hand, please. All right. Not seeing anybody. You said you want this one continued to July 1st also?
Yeah, at which time I'm hoping that that we could actually, get you guys to vote an issue and if you had staff right now, I'd be asking if the staff could be even, beginning the process once we submit of trying to draft a decision, but hopefully we can get something voted on and issued fairly quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to work on that with Tom and and the chair in between, but I think the most important thing is if there's any special conditions or anything that we haven't discussed already. I know we have the conservation restriction component, just having the plans in order, but if there's anything in particular that hasn't been discussed, that'd be helpful just to expedite that night.
Okay. And just make sure you get us our information
Yeah.
early so we can do it.
Yep. It might take me a little bit more to get you the full invasive stuff, a little bit more detail on that, but all of the rest of it I should have in, certainly by the end of the week, and I expect by the end of tomorrow.
Okay. Very good. All right, can I get a motion to continue this to July 1st?
So moved.
Second,
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Right.
All
Thank you
right,
very much.
you. All right, can I get a motion to close the public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So let's go back to, why don't we, the request for feedback on the geographical naming. So Andy, do we have any, graphics for that?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, we had a couple of documents that were submitted. Unfortunately, I was having an issue with Adobe earlier where what happens is if you open too many PDFs and try to run Zoom at the same time, it's an issue.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
little bit of a memory issue.
So I'm just pulling these
Oh,
up.
that's actually more the thing I wanted to see, the map of it.
Sorry, let me just, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so I guess folks want to officially change the name of that little pond to Hertichoke Pond. And they were looking for either comments or a thumbs up from the commission. I guess West Newbury's already thinks it's a good idea. I am fine with calling it that myself. Did anybody have any questions? Any suggestions?
The only thing that came to my mind was it seemed like it was a Native American name, and there wasn't any Native American feedback. And I don't know if there is any way to get that because I don't know that there's a recognized tribe or peoples nearby, but it seemed like that would be something I would want to know if that was possible. Because it harkened back, I think, to the Wampanoag, was it in their paperwork?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't know that that's possible, but it seems like if you're going to name it like that, you might want to check in on that,
I guess for us, I don't know that
Yeah.
it matters that much. I think that would be more of a USGS requirement, but they don't
Yep.
seem to care about those things anymore. So I don't
That's
know.
true. That's true, Joe. That's true. That was the only thing that came to my mind, but I didn't have any issue with it.
So who's asking for these comments? USGS or?
No, there some folks have some folks have I said, well, I think the information's on the city website too, but someone's been looking into doing this and they just wanted we have a name on there somewhere.
Yeah, it was an individual, wasn't it? A woman.
There was at least one individual who's just wants it named since it's a different thing. So yeah, that's USGS.
It looks like it's them.
Yeah, I guess it does look like it's them. Okay, I think I missed that part.
Okay, well, I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with it. So if
Neither.
anybody's got a real issue with it, let us know. But that's I assume this was West Newbury anyways, so I'm happy to go with what West Newbury wants on this.
Okay, do we have to
So-
vote on anything or?
I don't know. I think they were looking for feedback, but it's
Yeah, I think in a situation like this, they're not going to necessarily delay moving it forward with various things if we don't comment. But if you want to submit a comment, normally you just authorize the chair to, submit a comment, or the Office of Planning Development or something, whatever your feedback may be, just so it could be relayed on behalf of the commission. But I don't know in this case that, it's up to you whether you want to communicate back or, it's just neutral, or you have support for it, or, don't care. No.
well, it's I'm supportive of it. Is there anybody who's not supportive of it?
No,
No.
Yep.
Okay.
Julia's got her
No.
hand up.
I'll send an email to Andy that he can forward to the folks on this.
I think Julia has her hand up, Joe.
Oh, Julie, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to add, I read through this stuff today, and it looks like they just want you to fill out a form, or there needs to be a form filled out that just gets sent back to them, and that is the form of the approval.
Oh,
It's
okay.
pretty simple.
Was that one that Andy was showing us
I
earlier?
think so, right, Andy? It seems like there's just some fields that need to get filled in.
That was
in
just
terms
part of their formality, yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine. Sounds good. I'll do that. I'll take a look at it, take care of that. And as far as I don't know what the Port Place willow tree is all about. At least I don't remember. Do you know that, Ann? What is
Yeah, I
that
don't
about?
recall there being further documentation on that. So I can follow up with Diane. Julie and I are actually going to be following up tomorrow on a few things, so we can touch base on that. There might have been some prior dialogue that can with the commission or with the agent about that. I don't know if Julia knows.
yeah. I'll just add on that one as well. I do remember speaking with or emailing back and forth with, now I'm blanking on his name, the guy who's in charge of the landscape management out there, Cameron, I think is his
Cameron,
first-
yeah.
yeah, Cameron. Anyway, he was asking on behalf of the residents and the homeowners association if they could plant willow trees out there because of all the flooding that's been taking place the past couple of years, especially last year, where it just took forever to dissipate again. And they believe that planting willow trees will help with the uptake of all of that flood water and keep things a little bit drier. So at the time, I think when I got that email from him, I had already just retired. And so I just referred him to the commission that this be put on the agenda for you all to weigh in on it and see what you think.
Julia, do you know if they were asking for, was there a specific plan or locations involved, or was it more
There was
just
no
generic?
plan or location. So that would be the thing that we could get from them, is a plan showing where they want to plant these and how many of them. I mean, I know that some people think that willows are great. Other people think that they're not. It's something that maybe they have a landscaper who thinks it's a great idea for out there. I don't know.
Okay, I just found the email. Once you said his name, Cameron, that
Yeah.
rang a bell. So maybe what I can do is look at this and forward it to the rest of the commission and take a look at, see if.
It seems like it would take an awful lot of willow trees to suck up all the water. that's out
Yeah,
there.
it would.
But
You need a full-blown forest out there, but
yeah,
Yeah.
then they'd have a mess of willow branches everywhere that they'd be trying to clean up.
Well, that's their decision. They are good at sucking up water.
Mhm.
And they're not native though, are they? I don't think they're native.
Well, there are some that are. I don't know that weeping willows are, but
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if pussy willows I think are.
yeah.
And they certainly like wet areas.
Wellington willows have historically been used for that purpose, like in public
Right.
gardens and lots of places where there's ponded water. Yeah, I don't know if they're originally.
Okay, well, I can yeah, this is this is from back in May, so it's a couple weeks old. But I'll share that with everybody and see what people think. We can always discuss it at the next meeting.
I think a map and some sort of plan would be helpful.
Okay, all right.
I can circle back with Cameron and ask for that detail so that we can determine, if that's something that, and then how you want to handle that. We can confer a bit depending on how much is involved in their plan. Is it something simple or is it something that requires a full-blown filing,
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. What else? I don't even remember what's going on with 8S Street.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm happy to address that.
Okay.
So for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, and I stayed on because I saw this on the agenda, so I thought I would take an opportunity to give you an update. So I think that the last correspondence you had from us was either mid-March or early April. And at the time, the applicant had engaged Millennium Engineering, which has completed an existing conditions plan, but does not have the vegetation and resource areas included on the plan. So that's still being undertaken. Also, at that time, the applicant was considering putting an addition on their home, and they have decided not to do that, and actually have engaged a different architect to address the issue with regard to the storage trailer. And so they are actually potentially proposing to remove that and come in with an ADU. And so that meets the flood zone requirements. So the architect, though, is away out of the country, and we're still working on the site plan. So nobody has forgotten about this at all. But as you know, these consultants are incredibly busy right now and have been for a number of months. And so we're pushing and trying to get something into you.
Okay.
Should we keep it on the agenda or?
I'm fine. I mean, well, that's obviously it's up to you.
I think we'll carry it and just update you depending on where things are, just so it doesn't fall off the commission's radar
Okay.
either way.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, thank you. Have a great evening.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. All right, then. Now, do we have anything else?
Well, I'm going to be flying on July 1st and July 15th. There's
Your timing is perfect, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. I should have thought of that. But anyway, there's a chance I could make the July 1st meeting. Probably not the 15th.
Well, it'll be what it is, dude.
Um,
Can't you pay for Wi-Fi on the plane or something?
no.
Well,
Steve,
I thought I'd ask.
Steve, either case, if you're able to let us know as soon as you're able, or the group know, it's an email chain, just so everybody knows, and that way we can take account of both quorum and quantum of vote type stuff. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, the 15th, I'm 99% sure I wouldn't be able to make. The first, I'll have to look at the schedule.
Yeah.
But
That's fine. Whatever it is, man. What we need is the city to replace Julie so Julie can come and play with us too.
Well, there's still one other vacancy on the commission, isn't there?
Well, there's that part too, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
July 15th, I'll be traveling. And
Galen, well,
it will likely not be available.
so we will not have a quorum on the 15th.
Right. Well, unless you can get somebody appointed and sworn in.
Unless there's somebody appointed before then, which I'm gonna bet most of.
I would just say
Most of my,
procedurally, unfortunately, unless the council waives its rules, procedurally, that's not feasible.
Yeah. No, well. Okay.
Yeah, I guess we should try to keep an eye on a few things like that. It's difficult when we think about whether or not we are required to statutorily open a hearing or something versus, letting applicants know and trying to figure out the continuances and whatnot. So
Yeah.
So I did get sworn in today on my reappointment.
Oh, good.
So
All righty. Do we have anything else?
I had just one or two things if I could.
Okay. Yep.
One is just, I think you're probably all aware, but just as a reminder, the city council is looking at the city budget tomorrow night. They're expected to take their vote by the end of the evening. I guess the quick summary of their schedule, I understand that they are going to be talking about the capital improvement plan first for a couple of hours, is my understanding, possibly. And so the regular budget after that, normally I'd expect something the opposite sequence, but at any rate, they'll be looking at this budget tomorrow night, hoping that they do not make any proposed cuts to the line items here where we've asked for Julia's position to be increased to a full-time position as it was when I first got here some years ago, and hoping that the council sees the need for that here, with our being a coastal community, having a lot of resiliency and sustainability issues, needing to pursue more grants, having a lot of environmental and regulatory things that we need to work on and keep our eyes on. So hopefully they do not propose any cuts to the mayor's budget. We're the only, or one of the, I should say, few spots in the budget where there's an increase of any sort. There have been attrition losses or a few budget cuts in the next cycle because of the limited funding. So hopefully the council will not look to reduce that, any further. That was just one thing. The other one was touching base on the lots on the west end. You may recall, some of you may recall from a prior mention, we have a bunch of lots in an old subdivision or subdivisions on the west side of the city of I-95. It's what the assessors and tax collector would consider land of low value because they have some wetlands on them, a fair amount of wetlands over there. And so the original subdivisions that were, as you might imagine, decades ago, superimposed on the land, didn't take into account all the resource areas. Obviously, resource areas also evolve over time. And so there's a fair amount of parcels over there that are not, generally speaking, not developable, or one might argue are not developable. I'm just going to switch here for a second to show you the ones I'm referring to, so you just to make sure. So we're over here on the west side of the city, I-95. We're really talking about this chunk of lots down here, where the original subdivision is a bunch of paper streets. And so one of the things that we would like to do, Julie and I had been talking to Tom Hughes about this, but as I think you guys are all aware, Tom is very busy, isn't always able to cycle things in his schedule. So we may be working with another consultant for the wetlands delineation piece, but I wanted to check with the commission, hopefully with the commission's consent and being on the same page about it. Wanted to move ahead with essentially a wetlands scientist flagging the wetlands in these lots here, so that because there's a fair amount of these that are considered or in that tax title status and also have wetlands on them. So rather than sort of continue limping along with that situation over here, it seemed to make sense both for us, the assessors and the tax collector, to do a delineation over here, determine a couple of things. One is whether or not they should be taken off taken by tax title, taken off the tax roll listing there. And brought over to the city, essentially converted to conservation land. And we can follow up with a plan showing which lots are involved, because it's sort of you can kind of make them out here. But would make sense to me to use a small allocation of the conservation revolving account in order to do that delineation, in order to verify which of those parcels or whether a whole chunk of them, should be accepted by the city under tax title and then essentially converted to conservation land. So I don't know if there's any questions on that. I'm happy to pick that up in the next meeting if you want. I just wanted to bring that to your attention for those of you who hadn't heard it. and ask if the commission has any concerns about us using the conservation revolving account to get the delineation piece of this.
I don't. How much money are we talking about for?
Couple
That was-
$1,000. We're looking to do something that's a little bit more cursory than a, definitive survey with flaggings for meets and bounds of everything. We're trying to determine on a broad brush level whether or not there's even any potential here on these lots. One of the things, as a side note, there are a couple of parcels in the city. There's only one or two, but parcels in the city that could be used for affordable housing. So one of the questions that came up in relation to these lots was, are there any of these that could be made into a house? I'm sure by now somebody would be trying to do those. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of reasons for confirming, which of these have wetlands on them definitively or too much to be buildable, and then clearing the tax title land of it and bringing them over to put them underneath conservation land sort of permanently, if you will. If that's the case. And then if there is anything that is actually, it could be reconfigured or, developed in some way, that's a separate question that, others would have to determine whether or not to pursue those pieces or, take them or try to convert them to housing or whatnot. But I suspect, having walked out there a couple of times, that, that it's probably going to be a fair amount of wetlands and limitations, and even trying to reconfigure lots or build out another driveway on an old paper street that wasn't ever built. Maybe just not realistic. So, just floating the idea of trying to clear up our maps here in terms of open space and conservation land and some of these sort of forgotten paper street parcels that were carved up by a subdivision developer years ago, but never actually built out that way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I certainly don't have any problem with having the commission money pay for that.
Obviously, we'd be circling back with you to talk about, what the plan shows and where things may or may not go from there. It's up to the tax title, the mayor and the tax collector on the tax title line, but several different departments, have interest in, determining what's going on here. So.
Okay. So you're thinking it's probably a couple $1,000s?
Yeah, and it would probably take a couple months. We need to pick a different consultant, I think, just because of availability. Get them out there, circle back with a plan that shows comprehensively over, the affected lots, what, if anything, is buildable and if they're not buildable. And I think we would work with the tax collector over a period of a year or two to go through that. Unfortunately, that tax title process, I'm told, will take at least a year for them to work out with the DOR, if that's the case. So even just to do the formality of bringing it over to the city takes a while. So I wanted to get going on this wetlands thing because that's what's been holding up the question there in part. So.
Sure.
It does look like some of the houses out there may have crossed property lines onto.
Yeah, I would note, by the way, it's possible that the assessor's lines in here, don't forget that the MyMap lines are not 100% accurate. So hopefully we're not seeing a Plum Island sort of situation here.
Yeah.
We can verify or double check a few. I don't know whether some of those lots might be commonly owned. We can dig it might be a situation like that, but a good point. And obviously, if we're seeing a few things out there, we might flag and follow up on a few of those things. I don't know whether those lot lines are accurate, and I also don't know. I'd want to check and see whether or not they're commonly owned and whatnot. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. So what if is there an upper limit? Maybe folks would want to. You can give, if you want, you can give me the authority to say okay up to like $5,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was assuming that nowhere over $5,000 for the entire, the plan preparation, if need be, depending on what they find in the initial assessment. So, and obviously depending on what we, if we want to file anything with the commission, for any sort of record. So, if that's works for you, that works for me.
So ballpark figure, do you know how much we have in the account?
It's something like just under 40,000, I think, right now, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, let's say 5,000.
Okay. Well, let's make a motion and we'll vote.
Motion to allot up to $5,000 for wetlands delineation on tax title land or whatever.
Second.
All right. Roll call: Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. You don't need my you get up to $5,000 to spend on it.
Yeah, Thanks. Well, we'll circle back and give you an update, obviously, even, in advance of them going out there as well. Just, it'll take a little bit to get them engaged and out there.
Good.
Um,
Well, I always wondered what was going to happen with that area, but
Yeah, and it's like a perfect example of some subdivision developer from the 70s and 80s sort of superimposing a subdivision, rectilinear without any sort of, it's not designed with the land like Ian McCarg, and so forth. So
oh, it's just like the NAID plans for the common pasture for Cooper
yeah,
North Common Pasture.
yeah,
That
yeah,
place was going to be full of buildings,
yeah.
and didn't there were wetlands involved. Okay.
Um, Few other quick updates. Just as a reminder, with the budget, situation, obviously we're hoping the city council also doesn't touch the operating budget. Julia and Jordy and I have met a little bit with Matt and some others over the years, trying to take care of and get a little bit more ahead on the city's oversight of open space areas and conservation lands. So that's another piece that's part of our budget. It's not a significant piece, but it's something that I think we should expand on. These efforts that we've made. And then there's the Kmart project that's coming down the road, just FYI. Just for clarity, if there's any questions, let me know, but just mainly so everybody's up to speed on the same page. If there's any questions, we can flesh them out. It's a little bit unique as a permitting process, and the city hasn't seen it in, some 20 years or so. But it's a different statute. The Zoning Board of Appeals reviews a single permit for the Kmart development. If anybody's not generically aware of that project, let me know. I can unpack a little further. But at the Kmart site, the former Kmart building, this portion down here is going to be carved off as a separate lot, and a giant building will be proposed to be built in there, and that's before the Zoning Board of Appeals starting on the 24th next week. Starting a hearing process that will take a few months at least to go through that. I'm sure there'll be lots of public interest and input. But I mention it here mainly because the Conservation Commission would see a filing of some sort for that. I had talked initially with Tom Hughes about whether or not it would make any sense for that to be an RDA versus an NOI. Generically speaking, and I did talk with Joe about this briefly, but just in context, just so you're kind of up to speed as to what's happening. One, there's not really, because this is already covered area. It's all, building and parking area. There's not really any coverage that's changing here. So in effect, it's the temporary construction disturbance on site here happens to be proximate to or across the roadway from some wetland areas. There's a drainage area in here associated with the retail, facilities here. But generically speaking, it's not going to be changing those situations as long as erosion controls in place and the stormwater management's addressed, which is already going to be peer reviewed as part of that process. I mentioned that mainly because I don't have any issue with the sort of quote unquote streamlined permitting from an RDA perspective of that work here in context, because here it's already pre-developed area in its entirety. It's not like there's any conservation land on the rectangle even. However, it's also worth noting, and you may have some questions or concerns about that. Obviously, any input you have would be helpful. But I would expect that's the way that they're going to approach that with the commission, following at least initial review by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I mentioned the 40B process and conservation here because in a unique sort of idiosyncrasy in the way that 40B works, you have a Wetlands Protection Act that you oversee. And then you have the local ordinance, which builds upon that and goes further, which is great. And unfortunately, the Commonwealth didn't do that sort of blanket across the Commonwealth. So every community is sort of a patchwork to catch up and go further. And so here, the way the 40B works is the developer can go straight to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the portion of the wetlands protection or the wetlands regulations that are being reviewed locally. So the 25-foot no disturb or anything like that that's called out in the local ordinance, that is all now going to be the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals in looking at this project. Obviously, I would expect at the end of the day that the plans they're looking at are going to include, for the most part, the maintained coverage in here. There'll be less coverage actually because of some landscaped areas. Although they're relatively sparse, there will be some added in here more than there is today. And obviously the stormwater management features will be upgraded and whatnot. But I mention this so you're up to speed on what's happening here and where this is tracking, because at some point they'll probably come back after at least getting a little bit way through the ZBA, if not completely, to the Conservation Commission for the Wetlands Protection Act approval, whether that's the RDA or NOI to be seen. But just wanted to make sure everybody's up to speed on, one, the project coming along in some way to the commission and perhaps how that's filed, and also two, the fact that there'll be a distinction between the local ordinance being reviewed by the ZPA here, as opposed to the Conservation Commission, which essentially doesn't have control over that in this unique permitting situation.
Hey, Andy,
Yeah.
Minco was going to do something across the street at one point, and I don't know if this would affect what they were thinking of doing, as far as wetlands and all of that. I'm just, how those two projects tie in, if at all.
Sorry, I muted myself. I don't see any relationship there between the two. The stormwater management, obviously, and some of the culverts and drainage connections that ultimately reach wetland resource areas or streams or things like that. Everything kind of goes downhill there. So some of those things might tie in, with Low Street there in that area, but I don't see any bearing there really at all. I think the main thing, the quick summary from the development or zoning end of it, is that if this project is approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals, that then becomes in turn, because of some of the idiosyncrasies in the relevant statutes, it becomes a greater protection for the city to ensure that the type of development or the level of development on the adjacent parcel, is done the way the city wants it. As opposed to them filing a 40B and trying to circumvent local zoning in order to get a bigger building or project. So they're still interested in doing a similar project like we talked about, and we talked about the pros and cons of various features of that, in avoiding obviously resource areas. They had talked about or contemplated providing the remaining undeveloped land areas, open space to the city, all good stuff. But again, the size scale of that building and what's built out there it remains to be seen. But I don't see any bearing of one to the other. It's really independent.
Okay. So the Kmart 40B, that's going to get us over the 10% threshold?
Yeah, that project itself, just because of its size, brings us over the 10%. We're fleshing out a little bit more detail. As things go forward, we have to keep in mind it's a moving, what I would refer to as a moving target, because things come on and off that listing, depending on when the affordability restrictions expire and all this, stuff. One of the things to take into account is that we had credit on our inventory for the Minco project on Route 1, which has not yet started construction. And the way that the timeframes and the math works and everything is that effectively that goes on the listing at the time of planning board approval in that district as a 40R project, and then goes off the listing a little bit later when the developer doesn't follow through with the building permit and maybe is delayed a year or two. So while we might lose, essentially we're losing temporarily the Minco project on the listing until they start their construction and get going with occupancy. We would be gaining at the time of the ZBA approval the adding to the subsidized housing inventory the 10% threshold being reached, such that a future 40B could reasonably be denied by the Zoning Board of Appeals, something that's too large for zoning, too much development on a piece of land. They'd be in a better position to deny a 40B project at that point and stick to the local zoning and local ordinances and whatnot. So
good. Very good. Anything else?
I don't think so. Oh, the only other thing I was going to offer, I'll leave it to you. Just throw it out there for the chair and the other members. I know, and I think the commission's done this the entire time that I've been here and longer. But the way that something to think about, and we can touch base more, the chair and I, between now and the next meeting. But I would recommend more as like a best practice and a usual way of handling things. When you're doing the review of conditions and things, doing them at the same time. So as you've had the hearing on one project, discussing that and then closing that item out and then moving on to the next one. It's way that most boards run. It's a little more cleaner for the record, as far as tracking what's happened with each thing as we're going along. And it's a little bit, it may be, depending on the size of an audience, it may, depending on a given night, it's a little awkward where the audience and the applicants are sitting there till the end of the meeting, even through a bunch of other things, to see whether or not there are any special conditions and things. And sometimes you may benefit or want to have exchange with the applicant while developing or crafting conditions. Keep in mind, of course, I work with multiple boards, so I'm thinking a lot also from the planning board and ZBA perspective, which is a little bit more litigious in some ways than resource area defined. But it may be helpful to consider doing it the way that the other boards typically do, and I've seen most boards over the years and other communities do, which is to open a given hearing. The chair just announces the opening hearing. I don't think there's any procedural vote needed to open the hearings, but to just open the hearing, for a given application, blah, blah, blah. when you wrap up or close the hearing on it, then if you're making, closing the hearing and making conditions, doing that, and then moving on to the next one and doing the same. It's up to you, of course. I don't think there's any sort of, statutory provision that's violated by doing it the way you're doing it. It's just, it's a little bit more traditional, a little bit more of a complete flow through one application for the whole audience or applicant, and then moving on versus, if you have 4 or 5 people waiting till the end of the night and may not know, or you may, if they drop off, you may not have, have them. So just something to think about. Leave it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Alrighty then. Yeah, I'll talk with Andy about that. If anybody has ideas, let me know. And I'll take one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Alrighty. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
All
All right, folks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.